Hey everyone. We spend hours a day with our phones glued to our hands and often right up against our heads. But have you ever stopped to wonder what's actually going on inside our brains when we do that? Well, a really fascinating scientific study decided to find out, specifically with 5G. So let's dive in and break down what they discovered.
I mean, it's a huge question, right? It feels a little sci-fi, but it's also super personal. These little devices are with us constantly. So is all that close-range exposure having any kind of measurable impact on our brain activity? Well, that's exactly what this study wanted to figure out.
So, who did the work here? This study comes from the German Foundation for Health Information and Prevention, and their goal was pretty simple, really, to scientifically measure if holding a 5G phone to your head has a real, tangible effect on what's happening in your brain.
Okay, so here's the basic setup. Now, it was a small study, just 10 people. Each person made a 30-minute phone call using a totally standard iPhone 15 Pro, and they held it right up to their left ear, just like you would on a normal call. The way they designed this experiment was pretty clever. They set up 3 different situations to compare. First, they got a baseline reading of each person's brain activity with no phone anywhere nearby. Then they took another measurement during that 30-minute 5G call. And for the third part, they introduced a really interesting twist. They did the exact same call, but with a product called quantum upgrade running, just to see if it changed anything.
So how in the world do you actually see what the brain is doing? Well, the main piece of tech they used is called an EEG. Let's take a quick look at what that actually is. An electroencephalogram, or EEG, thank goodness for abbreviations, is basically a way to listen in on the brain's constant electrical chatter. For this study, they used a high-tech cap with 256 of these little electrodes to get a super detailed map of the brain's activity patterns, which we call brainwaves. All right, before we get to the results, here's a quick and dirty cheat sheet on brainwaves. Just think of it like this. Gamma is your brain in overdrive, like when you're super stressed or solving a hard problem. Beta is your normal, everyday, focused mind. Alpha is when you're more relaxed, kind of zoning out. And theta? That's when you're getting drowsy or deep in meditation. Got it? Those 4 are the key to everything that comes next. Okay, now for the main event. What did the EEG actually pick up when someone was on that 30-minute 5G phone call? Wow. Okay, just look at this for a second. The image on the left shows the brain in its baseline, resting state. Pretty calm. But the image in the middle? That's the brain during the 5G call. All of that bright red and yellow, that shows intense brain activation. The difference is, well, it's pretty stark. You can clearly see a huge jump in activity all over the brain. So that's what it looks like, but what do the numbers say? This chart is all about those gamma waves, remember? That's the high alert stress state. The first bar is the baseline. The second, towering bar, is during the 5G call. According to the study, gamma activity shot up significantly across the board. And it wasn't just gamma. They saw the same thing happen with beta waves, the ones for active, focused thinking. As you can see here, the activity level during the call was way, way higher than the baseline. It really suggests the brain just kicked into a much higher gear during that call.
But here's the really crucial part. It wasn't just that some things went up. Other things went down. The study found that while those stress and active waves were spiking, the brain waves tied to relaxation, alpha and theta, took a nosedive. So the brain basically became more agitated and a lot less calm. And this brings us to that third, kind of curious part of the whole experiment. This is where the researchers tested that product called quantum upgrade to see if it could actually change any of these results.
Okay, so here's the full picture. All 3 conditions right next to each other. On the left, you've got the calm baseline. In the middle, the 5G call with all that red, intense activity. And on the far right, that's the 5G call with the quantum upgrade product turned on. And according to how the study presents the scans, the brain on the right looks a whole lot more like the calm baseline on the left.
And again, the hard data seems to back up what our eyes are seeing. This chart shows those high-stress gamma waves again. The red bar is the 5G call alone, super high. The blue bar is the 5G call with the quantum upgrade. The study found that gamma activity was brought way, way down, much closer to that original baseline level. So if the stress waves went down, what about the relaxation waves? Well, check this out. This chart shows the alpha waves. They tanked during the regular 5G call, right? But with the quantum upgrade product, the study found that alpha activity bounced right back up to levels that were pretty much the same as the original calm baseline.
So, after all of that, the measurements, the different conditions, the brain scans, what was the final word? What was the big takeaway from the actual researchers who ran this thing?
Well, I'm just going to read this directly from their report because it says it all. They concluded that the results of the present EEG measurements indicate an effect of the quantum upgrade application, which significantly reduces the beta and gamma activations in the brain that occur during 5G exposure. In other words, they're saying their data shows it calmed down these stress states and encouraged the more relaxed brain waves. So, what are we supposed to do with all of this? Look, this is one very small-scale study, and it gives us a really fascinating but very specific snapshot. It definitely raises more questions than it answers, especially about the product they tested. But what it really does is highlight that we need way more research in this area. It's a powerful reminder to just stay curious and maybe a little critical about the technology that's become such a huge part of our daily lives.